The dust devil swirled through Johnson City, Texas, carrying with it the hollow sound of abandonment as Wyatt Bradford rode his chestnut mare down what used to be Main Street. And that was when he saw her, a woman in a faded blue dress sitting motionless on the steps of the old general store, her eyes fixed on something he could not see. It was August 1877, and the heat pressed down like a furnace door left open too long. Wyatt had been riding for 3 days straight, pushing through the scrubland between San Antonio and Austin, when he decided to veer off the main trail toward Johnson City. He had heard rumors that the town was dying, something about a fever that swept through and took most of the population with it. The few survivors had packed up and left, heading east to relatives or west to start fresh somewhere the ghosts would not follow them. But he had not expected to find anyone still here. Wyatt pulled his horse to a stop about 20 feet from the woman. She did not move, did not even acknowledge his presence. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, tangled and dull from lack of care. Her skin was pale despite the relentless sun, and her hands lay limp in her lap like she had simply given up on everything. "Miss," Wyatt called out, his voice cutting through the eerie silence. Nothing, not even a flicker of her eyes. He dismounted slowly, keeping his movements deliberate so as not to startle her. As he approached, he could see the hollowness in her face, the way her cheekbones stood out too sharply, the darkness under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and unanswered prayers. She could not have been more than 23 or 24 years old, but she looked like someone who had already lived 100 lifetimes of sorrow. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked again, gentler this time. Finally, her eyes shifted to meet his. They were green, he noticed, the color of spring grass after a rain, but there was no life in them, no spark of curiosity or fear or anything at all. "You should leave," she said, her voice raspy from disuse. "There is nothing here for you." "I can see that," Wyatt replied, glancing around at the empty buildings with their broken windows and sagging porches. "But I am wondering why you are still here." She turned her gaze back to whatever invisible point she had been staring at before. Waiting. For what? For it to be over. The words hit him harder than he expected. Wyatt had seen his share of despair in his 31 years. He had fought in the war when he was barely old enough to hold a rifle, watched his brother die at Gettysburg, come home to find his parents' farm burned to the ground. He knew what it meant to look into the abyss and feel it looking back. But something about this woman, sitting here alone in this ghost town, stirred something in him he thought he had buried long ago. "What is your name?" he asked. She hesitated, like even that simple question required too much effort. "Emma," she finally said. "Emma Jennings." "Well, Emma Jennings, my name is Wyatt Bradford, and I think you should come with me." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Why would I do that?" "Because sitting here waiting to die is not much of a plan. It is the only plan I have left." Wyatt crouched down so he was at eye level with her. "What happened here?" Emma closed her eyes, and for a moment he thought she might not answer. Then slowly the words began to spill out like water from a cracked dam. "Cholera," she said. "It came through in June. Started with the Henderson family, spread like wildfire after that. My parents, my 2 brothers, my sister, they all got sick within a week. I tried to take care of them, but there was nothing I could do. Nothing anyone could do. They died, all of them, and then the doctor died, and then the preacher, and then it just kept going until there were more bodies than living people to bury them." Her voice was flat, emotionless, like she was reciting a grocery list instead of describing the death of everyone she loved. The ones who did not get sick, they ran. They packed up in the middle of the night and just left. I stayed because I kept thinking maybe it would take me too, maybe I would get sick and it would all be over. But I did not get sick. I just kept waking up every morning in this empty town, and I kept waiting, and here I am." Wyatt felt his chest tighten. "How long have you been alone here?" 6 weeks, maybe 7. I stopped counting after the first month, and you have been sitting on these steps the whole time. Not the whole time. I go inside sometimes. There is food still in some of the houses, canned goods and such. I eat when I remember to. But mostly I just sit here and think about how it would be easier if I just stopped. Stopped what? Eating, breathing. The stark honesty of it took his breath away. Wyatt stood up, running a hand through his dark hair. The sun was starting to sink lower on the horizon, painting the empty street in shades of orange and red. He had planned to rest here for the night, water his horse, maybe find some supplies before pushing on to Austin. But he could not leave this woman here. He just could not. "Listen to me," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "I do not know what your beliefs are about life and death and what comes after, but I know this. You survived when everyone else did not. Maybe that means something, maybe it does not. But you are still here, still breathing, and that means you have got a choice to make. You can sit on these steps until you waste away, or you can get up and find a reason to keep living." Emma opened her eyes and looked at him with an expression that was almost amused. "And what reason would that be, Mr. Bradford? Everyone I loved is dead. Everything I knew is gone. What exactly am I supposed to live for?" "I do not know yet," he admitted, "but you will not find it sitting here. Where would you suggest I go?" "I have no money, no family, no skills beyond keeping house and tending a garden. Even if I wanted to leave, where would I go?" Wyatt made a decision in that moment that would change both their lives. "You come with me. I am heading to Austin to meet up with a cattle outfit that is hiring drovers for a run up to Kansas. I can get you to Austin, help you find work, somewhere to stay. At least there you will be around living people instead of ghosts. You do not even know me." "No, I do not. But I know what it looks like when someone has given up, and I am telling you it does not have to be this way." Emma stared at him for a long moment, and he could see the war going on behind her eyes. Part of her wanted to refuse, to send him away and return to her vigil of slow surrender. But another part, a tiny spark that had not quite been extinguished, was listening. "Why do you care?" she asked quietly. Wyatt thought about lying, about giving her some noble reason that would make him sound like a better man than he was. But something about her raw honesty demanded the same in return. "Because I have been where you are," he said. "After the war, after I lost everything, I spent 2 years drifting from town to town, doing just enough to survive but not really living. I was angry at God, at the world, at myself for not dying when I had the chance. And then one day I was in a saloon in Santa Fe, drunk out of my mind, about to pick a fight with a man twice my size, just so he would put a bullet in me and end it. And this old Mexican woman, she must have been 80 years old, she came up to me and said something I have never forgotten. She said, 'Mijo, death will find you soon enough. Do not go looking for it. Make it earn you.'" He paused, watching Emma's face for any reaction. "I did not understand what she meant at the time," he continued. "But over the years, I have come to realize she was telling me that life is hard and painful, and sometimes it feels like more than we can bear. But the very fact that we are still standing, still fighting, even when we want to quit, that means something. It means we are stronger than we think. And maybe, just maybe, there is something worth living for that we have not found yet." Emma's eyes were glistening now, the first real emotion he had seen from her. "I am so tired," she whispered. "I know. I do not know if I can do this. You do not have to know right now. You just have to stand up and take the first step. We will figure out the rest as we go." For a long moment, Emma did not move. Then, slowly, she pushed herself to her feet. Her legs were unsteady and Wyatt reached out to support her elbow. She flinched at the touch, but she did not pull away. "I need to get some things," she said, her voice barely audible. "All right. I will wait here." She disappeared into the general store, and Wyatt heard her moving around inside. He used the time to tend to his horse, checking her hooves and giving her water from the trough that still had some in it, likely from rain. The mare, Rosie, had been with him for 5 years now, through heat and cold and everything in between. She was steady and reliable, qualities he valued above just about anything else. Emma emerged about 15 minutes later carrying a worn canvas bag. She had changed into a more practical traveling dress, brown with buttons up the front, and had tied her hair back with a ribbon. She looked slightly more alive than she had before, though the shadows under her eyes remained. "I do not have much," she said, holding up the bag. "Some clothes, a few things that belong to my mother, that is it." "That is fine. We will travel light. Can you ride?" "Not really. I have been on a horse maybe 3 times in my life." Wyatt nodded, thinking, "All right, you will ride with me then. Rosie here is strong enough to carry us both, at least until we can get to the next town and see about getting you your own mount." He helped Emma up onto the saddle first, then swung up behind her. She was tense in front of him, her back rigid, but she did not protest. He gathered the reins and nudged Rosie forward. And just like that, they were leaving Johnson City behind. They rode in silence for the first hour, the empty town slowly disappearing behind them. The sun had set by the time they reached the edge of the scrubland, and Wyatt knew they would need to make camp soon. He found a spot near a small creek, sheltered by a cluster of mesquite trees, and helped Emma down from the horse. "We will stop here for the night," he said, starting to gather wood for a fire. Emma stood awkwardly to the side, watching him work. "Can I help? You can fill the canteens from the creek if you want. The water looks clear enough." She nodded and took the canteens, moving toward the sound of running water. Wyatt built the fire and unpacked his bedroll and the small supply of food he had been carrying. He had some dried beef, hardtack, and a little coffee. It was not much, but it would do. When Emma returned, he handed her a piece of the beef and some hardtack. She took it mechanically, chewing without really tasting. They ate in silence, the crackling of the fire the only sound between them. "Where are you from originally?" Emma asked suddenly, surprising him. "Virginia," Wyatt replied. "My family had a farm outside of Richmond, tobacco mostly. I was the youngest of 3 boys. My oldest brother died at Gettysburg. My middle brother, he made it through the war but got shot in a bar fight about a year after he came home. My parents both passed from pneumonia the winter after that, so now it is just me." Emma looked at him with new understanding. "So you really do know what it is like?" "Yeah, I really do. What made you keep going?" Wyatt poked at the fire with a stick, watching the sparks rise into the night sky. "Honestly, I do not know if I made a conscious choice at first. I just sort of kept moving because that is what you do. You wake up, you do the next thing, you go to sleep, you wake up again. And then somewhere along the way, I realized I was not just surviving anymore. I was actually living again. It happened so gradually I almost did not notice. What changed? I met people who reminded me that there was still good in the world. I saw places that took my breath away. I found work that made me feel useful. Little things, mostly, but they added up." Emma pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "I do not know if I can do that. I do not know if I remember how." "You do not have to figure it all out tonight," Wyatt said gently. "Right now, you just need to rest. Tomorrow we will ride, and the day after that we will ride some more, and we will take it one day at a time." He spread out his bedroll for her. "You take this. I will sleep on the ground. I cannot take your bedroll." "Yes, you can. I have slept on worse." Emma looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion was written all over her face. She lay down on the bedroll, pulling her shawl around her shoulders. Within minutes, she was asleep, her breathing soft and steady. Wyatt sat by the fire for a long time, keeping watch. He was not sure why he had taken on this responsibility. It would have been easier to ride away, to tell himself that Emma's problems were not his to solve. But something about her had reached through all the walls he had built around himself. Maybe it was recognition of his own past pain. Maybe it was something else. Either way, he had made a promise to help her, and Wyatt Bradford was a man who kept his promises. The next morning, they were back on the trail by sunrise. Emma was stiff and sore from sleeping on the ground, but she did not complain. They rode steadily through the morning, the landscape gradually changing from scrubland to rolling hills dotted with oak trees. The air was still hot, but there was a slight breeze that made it bearable. They stopped around noon to rest the horse and eat a quick meal. Emma had been quiet all morning, lost in her own thoughts, but as they sat in the shade of a large oak tree, she finally spoke. "Why were you in Johnson City? You said you were heading to Austin. That town is not exactly on the way." Wyatt took a sip of water from his canteen. "I heard there might be supplies left behind. I was running low on coffee, and I figured an empty town would not miss a few cans of beans. So you went there to scavenge. I guess you could put it that way. I prefer to think of it as making use of things that would otherwise go to waste." A small smile tugged at the corner of Emma's mouth. It was the first smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her face. She was actually quite beautiful when she was not weighed down by grief. "What?" Wyatt asked, noticing her expression. "Nothing. It is just, you came to steal from a dead town and you ended up with a half-dead woman instead. That is not exactly the haul you were hoping for." "No," Wyatt agreed, his own mouth quirking up, "but life is full of surprises." They continued riding, and as the day wore on, Emma began to relax a little. She asked questions about where he had been, what he had seen, and Wyatt found himself telling her stories about his years of drifting. He told her about the time he worked on a ranch in New Mexico and had to chase down a bull that escaped during a thunderstorm. He told her about the night he spent in a jail cell in El Paso after a misunderstanding involving a card game and an angry cattle baron. He told her about the mountains in Colorado and the way the snow looked in the morning light, pristine and untouched. Emma listened to everything, drinking in his words like someone who had been starved for human connection. And in a way, Wyatt supposed she had been. 6 weeks alone in that empty town, with nothing but her own dark thoughts for company. No wonder she had been ready to give up. They reached a small settlement called Cedar Springs just as the sun was setting on their second day of travel. It was not much, just a handful of buildings clustered around a crossroads, but it had a general store and a boarding house, which was all they needed. Wyatt got them 2 rooms at the boarding house, paying the proprietor, a stern woman named Mrs. Harrison, with some of the money he had saved from his last job. The rooms were small but clean, with real beds and wash basins. It was luxury compared to sleeping on the ground. "We will stay here tonight and resupply in the morning," Wyatt said as he handed Emma her room key. "There is a bathhouse out back if you want to clean up. I will see about getting us a hot meal." Emma nodded, her fingers closing around the key. "Wyatt," she said, stopping him before he could leave. "Yeah, thank you for everything. I know I have not been very good company, and I know this is not what you signed up for when you rode into Johnson City, but I am grateful, more than I can say." Wyatt felt something warm unfurl in his chest. "You are better company than you think, Emma. Get some rest. We have a few more days of hard riding ahead of us." That night, After they had eaten a simple but satisfying meal of stew and cornbread at the boarding house's small dining room, Wyatt lay in his bed staring at the ceiling. He could hear the sounds of the settlement through the thin walls, voices and laughter, and the general hum of human activity. It was comforting in a way, a reminder that the world was still turning despite all the pain and loss. He thought about Emma, about the weight of grief she was carrying and how it reminded him so much of his own past. He had meant what he said to her, about life being worth living even when it was hard. But he also knew that believing something and feeling it were two different things. He could see that she was trying, taking those first fragile steps back toward life, but he also knew how easy it would be for her to slip back into that darkness. The thought of her giving up, of her returning to that empty town or finding some other way to end her pain, filled him with a fierce determination. He would get her to Austin. He would help her find her footing. And maybe, just maybe, along the way they would both find something they had not been looking for. The next morning they visited the general store to stock up on supplies. Emma needed practical things, riding clothes and boots, a hat to keep the sun off her face. The shopkeeper, a friendly man named Mr. Peterson, showed them what he had in stock. "You folks passing through?" he asked as Wyatt paid for their purchases. "Heading to Austin," Wyatt replied. "That is a fair distance still. You will want to keep an eye out for bandits. There have been reports of a group operating between here and there, preying on travelers." Wyatt's hand instinctively moved to the gun at his hip. "Appreciate the warning." As they left the store, Emma glanced at him. "Are you worried about bandits?" "I am always careful," Wyatt said. "But I can handle myself if it comes to that, and I will make sure nothing happens to you." They purchased a second horse from a local rancher, a gentle mare named Daisy that Emma could ride. Wyatt spent an hour working with Emma, teaching her the basics of riding, how to hold the reins, how to sit in the saddle, how to guide the horse with pressure from her legs. She was awkward at first, tense and uncertain, but she learned quickly. "You are doing fine," Wyatt encouraged as they practiced in an empty field behind the boarding house. "Just relax and let the horse do most of the work." "Easy for you to say," Emma muttered, but there was a hint of humor in her voice. By the time they left Cedar Springs the next morning, Emma was competent enough to ride on her own, though Wyatt kept a close eye on her. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, riding side by side when the trail was wide enough, single file when it narrowed. They talked more now, the silence between them less heavy, less fraught with unspoken pain. Emma asked him about his dreams, what he wanted from life, and Wyatt found himself being more honest with her than he had been with anyone in years. "I think about settling down sometimes," he admitted as they rode through a grove of pecan trees. "Finding a piece of land, building a house, maybe raising some cattle or horses. Something permanent, you know. I have been drifting for so long that I almost forget what it is like to have roots." "Why do not you do it then?" "I guess I have not found the right place yet, or maybe I have not found the right reason." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I always thought I would spend my whole life in Johnson City. I would marry someone from town, have children, grow old watching them have children of their own. It was not a grand dream, but it was mine. And now it is gone." "So you will dream a new dream," Wyatt said. "It will not be the same, but that does not mean it cannot be good." "Do you really believe that?" "I am starting to." On their fourth day of travel, they ran into trouble. They were crossing a rocky stretch of terrain when three men on horseback emerged from behind a cluster of boulders, blocking their path. They were rough-looking characters, unshaven and hard-eyed, with guns prominently displayed on their hips. "Well, well," the one in the middle said, grinning to show a mouthful of crooked teeth. "What do we have here? A couple of travelers all alone. You folks look like you could use some company." Wyatt's hand moved casually to his gun, but he kept his voice calm. "We are not looking for trouble, just passing through." "That is the thing about trouble," the man said. "Sometimes it finds you whether you are looking for it or not. Now, why do not you both get down off those horses nice and slow and hand over whatever valuables you are carrying?" Wyatt could feel Emma's fear radiating from her, but to her credit, she stayed still and quiet. He measured the distance between himself and the bandits, calculated his chances. 3 against 1 were not great odds, but he had faced worse. "I've got about $20 in my saddlebag," Wyatt said slowly. "You are welcome to it if you let us pass peacefully." The bandit laughed. "Oh, I will take the $20, but I think I will take the horses too. And maybe the lady, if she is feeling friendly." That was all Wyatt needed to hear. In one smooth motion, he drew his revolver and fired, hitting the leader in the shoulder before the man could even react. The other 2 bandits scrambled for their weapons, but Wyatt was faster, putting a bullet in the arm of the one on the left. The 3rd bandit raised his hands immediately. "We are done here," Wyatt said coldly. "Ride away and do not come back." The bandits did not need to be told twice. They gathered their injured leader and spurred their horses into a gallop, disappearing back the way they had come. Wyatt holstered his gun and turned to Emma, who was staring at him with wide eyes. "Are you all right? You shot them," she said, her voice shaky. "I did not kill them. Just sent a message." "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "The war. Then years of needing to defend myself. I do not like violence, Emma, but I will not hesitate to use it if I have to, especially to protect someone I care about." The last words slipped out before he could stop them, and he saw Emma's expression shift, something softening in her eyes. "You care about me?" she asked quietly. Wyatt met her gaze, and in that moment he realized it was true. Somewhere over the past few days, Emma had gone from being a responsibility to being something more. He cared what happened to her. He wanted to see her smile, hear her laugh, watch her find her way back to life. "Yeah," he said simply. "I do." They did not talk about it further, but something had changed between them. Emma rode closer to him after that, their knees occasionally brushing as their horses walked side by side. When they made camp that night, she sat next to him by the fire instead of keeping her distance. "Tell me something about you that no one else knows," Emma said as they watched the flames dance. Wyatt thought for a moment. "I used to write poetry. When I was younger, before the war. Terrible poetry, mind you, but I enjoyed it. I have not written anything in years." Emma looked surprised. "Really? You do not strike me as the poetry type." "What type do I strike you as?" "The strong, silent type. The kind of man who solves problems with his gun and does not talk much about feelings." Wyatt chuckled. "Well, that is what years of hard living will do to you. But underneath all this," he gestured at himself, "there is still a part of me that appreciates beauty, that wants to capture moments in words. I would like to read your poetry someday. Trust me, you would not. But maybe I will write something new, something better." Emma leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture that felt both natural and momentous. "I am glad you found me, Wyatt Bradford." "I am glad too, Emma Jennings." They reached Austin on a hot afternoon in late August, the city sprawling before them with its mix of wooden buildings and newer stone structures. The streets were busy with people, horses, wagons, all the chaos and energy of a growing city. After days of open country, it felt overwhelming. Wyatt led them to a modest hotel near the center of town, getting them separate rooms again, though part of him wished things were different. They cleaned up and met in the hotel's dining room for a proper meal, the first they had had in days. "So what happens now?" Emma asked as they ate. "Now we figure out your next steps. There are employment agencies in town, places that help match people with jobs. I know you said you have skills in keeping house and such. There are families here who need help, especially those with children. We will find you something." Emma pushed food around her plate. "And what about you? You said you were meeting up with a cattle outfit. That can wait. I want to make sure you are settled first. You have done so much for me already. You do not have to keep taking care of me." Wyatt reached across the table and took her hand. "What if I want to?" Emma's eyes widened, and he saw her pulse quicken in her throat. "Wyatt, I know this is complicated," he interrupted gently. "I know you are still grieving, still finding your feet. And I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give. But I need you to know that these past few days with you, they have meant something to me. You mean something to me." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I thought I was dead inside. I thought I would never feel anything again. But being with you, listening to your stories, seeing the way you look at the world, it has reminded me that I am still alive. And I do not want to just survive anymore. I want to live." "Then live," Wyatt said, "and let me be part of it." Emma squeezed his hand. "I would like that. Very much." Over the next few weeks, they built a life in Austin. Wyatt found work as a hired hand at a ranch outside of town, breaking horses and mending fences. The pay was decent, and more importantly, it was steady. Emma found a position as a housekeeper for a wealthy family named the Caldwells, who lived in a large house on the edge of the city. Mrs. Caldwell was a kind woman with 3 young children, and she took to Emma immediately. Wyatt and Emma saw each other every Sunday, his day off, spending their time exploring the city, walking along the river, talking about everything and nothing. Slowly, carefully, they were building something real between them. Wyatt loved the way Emma laughed now, freely and often, the sound like music after the silence of her grief. He loved the way she saw beauty in small things, a wildflower growing between the stones, a bird singing in a tree, the color of the sky at sunset. And Emma loved Wyatt's quiet strength, the way he listened when she talked, really listened, like her words mattered. She loved his hands, calloused and scarred from years of hard work, but gentle when they touched her face. She loved the way he made her feel safe, protected, but never smothered. One Sunday in late October, Wyatt took Emma to a spot he had discovered along the Colorado River, a small clearing shaded by cypress trees where the water ran clear and cool. They had packed a picnic lunch, and they spread a blanket on the grass, eating and talking as the river burbled nearby. "I have been thinking," Wyatt said after they had finished eating. "About what?" "About what I told you that first day. About wanting to find a piece of land, build something permanent. I have been saving my wages, and I think I almost have enough to make a down payment on some property. There is a parcel about 10 miles outside of Austin, near the ranch where I am working. It has a creek running through it, good grazing land, a stand of oak trees that would be perfect for building a house." Emma's heart began to race. "That sounds wonderful." "It would be a lot of work," Wyatt continued, not quite meeting her eyes. "Building a house, starting a herd, making it into something. It would take years to really get it going, and it would be lonely doing it all by myself. Are you asking me something, Wyatt Bradford?" He finally looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes took her breath away. "I am asking if you would consider building that life with me, as my wife. I know we have only known each other a few months, and I know you have been through hell and back. If you are not ready, I understand. I will wait as long as you need. But Emma, I love you. I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you on those steps, so broken and so brave at the same time. And I want to spend the rest of my life showing you every single day that life is worth living." Emma's tears were falling freely now, but she was laughing too, joy bubbling up from somewhere deep inside her. Yes, yes, I will marry you. Wyatt pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. I promise I will make you happy, he murmured against her hair. You already have, Emma whispered back. They were married in December at the small church in Austin, with Mrs. Caldwell and her family in attendance, along with some of the men Wyatt worked with at the ranch. It was a simple ceremony, but it was perfect. Emma wore a cream-colored dress that Mrs. Caldwell had helped her sew, and Wyatt wore his best shirt and a new pair of trousers. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Wyatt kissed her for the first time as her husband, Emma felt something inside her that she thought had died forever come roaring back to life. It was hope. They moved into a small cabin on the edge of Austin while Wyatt worked on buying the land and making plans for their house. It was cramped and drafty, but it was theirs, and that made all the difference. Emma continued working for the Caldwells, and Wyatt took extra work whenever he could, determined to save enough to make his dream a reality. Their life was not easy. There were days when Wyatt came home exhausted from working from dawn to dusk, his hands bleeding from rope burns and his back aching. There were nights when Emma woke up from nightmares about Johnson City, about watching her family die while she stood by helpless. But they had each other, and that was enough. When Wyatt was tired, Emma rubbed his sore muscles and made him laugh with stories about the Caldwell children's antics. When Emma was sad, Wyatt held her and reminded her that she was safe, that she was loved, that she was not alone. By the spring of 1878, Wyatt had saved enough to make a down payment on the land he wanted. It was 60 acres of beautiful Texas countryside, with that creek he had mentioned, and those oak trees perfect for building. They spent every spare moment out there, camping under the stars while Wyatt sketched plans for their house in a notebook he had bought for that purpose. It will have a big kitchen, he told Emma one night as they lay on their backs looking up at the stars. With a window over the sink so you can look out at the trees while you work, and a fireplace in the main room, big enough to keep us warm in the winter, and a porch where we can sit in the evenings and watch the sun set. How many bedrooms? Emma asked, her hand resting on her stomach where a tiny life was just beginning to grow, though she had not told Wyatt yet. 3, I think. 1 for us and 2 more for the future. Emma turned to face him. What if I told you we would need one of those rooms sooner than you think? Wyatt's eyes widened as he processed her words. Emma, are you saying I am expecting? The baby should come in late October, early November. Wyatt let out a whoop of joy that echoed across the empty land, gathering Emma into his arms and spinning her around. We are going to have a baby. We are going to have a family. Emma laughed, holding on to him. I was nervous to tell you. I know we are still getting established and a baby will make things harder. Harder, maybe, but also more wonderful. Emma, this is the best news you could have given me. Wyatt threw himself into building their house with renewed energy. He hired a few men to help with the heavy work, and together they raised the frame, put on the roof, built the chimney. Emma helped as much as she could in the early months, painting and sewing curtains and planting a garden near where the kitchen would be. As her pregnancy progressed, Wyatt made her rest more, but she still came out to the property every day, watching their dream take shape. The house was finished in early September, just in time. It was everything Wyatt had promised and more. The kitchen was bright and airy, with that big window overlooking the trees. The fireplace was large enough to roast a whole pig if they wanted. The porch was wide and welcoming, with 2 rocking chairs Wyatt had built himself. Their bedroom had a real bed that Wyatt had bought from a carpenter in Austin, and the 2 other bedrooms stood ready for the children they hoped to fill them with. They moved in on a warm September afternoon, Emma waddling now with the baby sitting low. Mrs. Caldwell had given Emma her blessing to stop working, knowing the birth was imminent, and she had been generous with gifts for the baby, blankets and clothes, and a beautiful cradle that had been in her family for generations. Their son was born on the 1st of November, just as the weather was turning cooler. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Wyatt feared he might lose Emma, that cruel twist of fate stealing her away just when they had built something so beautiful together. But Emma was strong, stronger than he had ever imagined, and when the midwife finally placed their son in Wyatt's arms, red-faced and howling, he wept with relief and joy. "What should we name him?" Emma asked, exhausted but radiant. Wyatt looked down at his son, this tiny perfect person who was half him and half Emma, and thought about everything they had been through to get to this moment. "What about Samuel? Samuel Bradford." "Samuel," Emma repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Hello, Samuel." "Welcome to the world, little one." Being a father changed Wyatt in ways he had not anticipated. He had always been responsible, hardworking, but now there was an urgency to everything he did. This was not just about him and Emma anymore. This was about building something that would last, creating a legacy for his son. He expanded his cattle operation, buying more land as he could afford it, building his herd. Emma managed the household with the same efficiency she had shown at the Caldwells, making their house into a home with her touches, curtains in the windows, flowers on the table, the smell of bread baking in the oven. Samuel was a happy baby, quick to smile, and watching Emma with him filled Wyatt with an almost painful love. This woman who had been waiting to die in an empty town was now so full of life, singing to their son as she rocked him, laughing at his baby babbling, glowing with the pure joy of motherhood. "I never thought I would have this," Emma told Wyatt one night as they sat on the porch, Samuel asleep in her arms. "A husband who loves me, a beautiful home, a child. When you found me in Johnson City, I had given up on everything, and now look at us." Wyatt pulled her close, careful not to wake the baby. "You gave me something to live for too. I was drifting before I met you, just going through the motions. But you changed that. You made me want to build something, to put down roots, to have a future. Do you ever regret it?" Giving up the drifting life? Not for a second. This right here, you and Samuel and this land, this is everything I never knew I wanted. The years passed in a blur of hard work and simple pleasures. Samuel grew from a baby into a curious toddler, then a rambunctious little boy who loved to follow his father around the ranch. Wyatt taught him to ride almost as soon as he could walk, putting him on a gentle old mare and leading her around the property. Emma watched from the porch, her hand resting on her growing belly, for there was another baby on the way. Their daughter, Grace, was born in the spring of 1881 with Emma's green eyes and Wyatt's dark hair. She was quieter than Samuel had been, content to watch the world with solemn eyes, but when she smiled, it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. The ranch prospered. Wyatt's reputation as a fair dealer and a hard worker spread, and he found himself with more opportunities than he could manage alone. He hired hands to help with the cattle, men he trusted, and together they built the ranch into something substantial. Emma started raising chickens and selling eggs in town, adding to their income and giving her a sense of independence she valued. But it was not just about the work or the money. It was about the life they were building together. It was Sunday dinners with all of them around the table, Samuel chattering about his adventures and Grace watching everything with her big eyes. It was summer evenings on the porch, Emma in her rocking chair with mending in her lap while Wyatt played his harmonica, the children chasing fireflies in the yard. It was winter nights by the fire, reading together from the books Emma loved and Wyatt had learned to appreciate. There were hard times too, of course. A drought in 1883 that killed off a quarter of their herd. A bout of influenza that swept through the family, leaving them all weak and scared. The normal struggles of raising children, of marriage, of trying to make a living from the land. But they faced it all together, and that made all the difference on their 10th wedding anniversary. In December of 1887, Wyatt gave Emma a gift he had been working on in secret. It was a book, leather-bound and filled with pages of his handwriting. "What is this?" Emma asked, turning it over in her hands. "Open it," she did, and saw that it was poetry. Pages and pages of poems, all written by Wyatt, all about her. About the day he found her in Johnson City, about their wedding, about the birth of their children. About ordinary moments that he had made extraordinary with his words. They were not perfect poems. The meter was sometimes off, and the rhymes were occasionally forced, but they were honest and heartfelt, and so very Wyatt. Emma read through the entire book with tears streaming down her face. "These are beautiful," she whispered. "You made me want to write again," Wyatt said. "You made me want to capture beauty in words, and you are the most beautiful thing in my life." Emma set the book aside and pulled him close. "I love you, Wyatt Bradford. I have loved you from almost the moment I met you, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "You are not allowed to die," Wyatt said, only half joking. "We have got too much living left to do." And they did. Their third child, a son they named Thomas, was born in 1889. Samuel grew into a young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did, already talking about taking it over someday and expanding it even further. Grace was quieter but equally determined, with a head for numbers that made her invaluable in managing the ranch's finances. And little Thomas, well, he was still finding his way, but Wyatt and Emma had no doubt he would grow into someone remarkable. The ranch continued to thrive, becoming one of the most successful in the region. Wyatt and Emma were respected members of their community, known for their generosity and their willingness to help neighbors in need. They had not forgotten what it was like to be desperate and alone, and they made sure no one who came to them asking for help was turned away. On a warm evening in June of 1895, Wyatt and Emma sat on their porch watching the sun set, just as they had done thousands of times before. Samuel was out checking on the herd. Grace was inside putting Thomas to bed. It was just the two of them, hands linked, comfortable in the silence that came from years of knowing each other. "You remember that day I found you?" Wyatt asked suddenly. "Every detail," Emma replied. "I remember the dust and the heat and how empty everything felt. And then you rode up like something out of a dream, and you gave me a reason to keep living. You gave me a reason too. I did not even know I needed one until I met you." Emma leaned her head on his shoulder. "We have built a good life, have we not? The best life, better than I ever imagined. Do you think about the people we used to be? Before Johnson City, before the war, before all the loss," Wyatt thought about it. "Sometimes. But I do not wish I could go back. Those experiences, as painful as they were, they shaped us. They brought us to this moment right here. And I would not trade this for anything." Emma lifted her head to look at him, her green eyes still as beautiful as the day he first saw them, though there were lines around them now, evidence of years of laughter and tears and life well lived. "I was so broken when you found me. I truly believed there was nothing left for me, but you saw something in me I could not see in myself. You saw a future when all I could see was the past. We saved each other," Wyatt said simply. "That is what love does. It sees us at our worst and says, 'I choose you anyway.' It takes our broken pieces and builds something new." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and pink, Wyatt pulled Emma closer. Their children were healthy and happy. Their land was prosperous. They had built something that would last long after they were gone, a legacy of love and hard work, and the stubborn refusal to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. Years continued to pass. Samuel married a sweet girl from town named Mary, and they gave Wyatt and Emma 3 grandchildren who filled the ranch with laughter and chaos. Grace surprised everyone by falling in love with a teacher who moved to the area, a gentle man who appreciated her sharp mind and quiet strength. They settled on a piece of land adjacent to the ranch, close enough to visit often. Thomas, their youngest, developed a passion for horses, breeding and training them with a skill that made Wyatt proud beyond measure. The turn of the century came, and with it, changes. The Wild West was becoming less wild, more civilized. Towns were growing into cities. The railroad reached places that had once been accessible only on horseback. But on the Bradford Ranch, life maintained a certain timelessness. The work still needed doing. The cattle still needed tending. The land still demanded respect and care. Wyatt and Emma grew older together, their hair turning gray, their steps becoming slower, but their love never diminishing. If anything, it deepened with time, like a river carving its channel ever deeper into stone. They knew each other's thoughts, could communicate with a glance, had developed that particular intimacy that comes only from decades of shared life. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were dozens of people there, children and grandchildren, neighbors and friends, all come to honor the couple who had built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, stories told and retold about the old days. As the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Samuel pulled his parents aside. "Mary and I have been talking," he said, glancing at his wife, who nodded encouragingly. "We want you two to know how much you have meant to us, not just as parents, but as examples of what a marriage should be. The way you love each other, the way you have built this life together, it is what we aspire to." Emma's eyes filled with tears, and Wyatt put his arm around her. "That means more than you know, son," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Later that night, alone in their bedroom, Emma sat at her dressing table brushing her hair while Wyatt got ready for bed. She looked at their reflection in the mirror, this older couple who had been through so much together, and felt a profound sense of contentment. "What are you thinking about?" Wyatt asked, noticing her expression. "How lucky I am. How close I came to missing all of this. If you had ridden through Johnson City a day earlier or a day later, if you had not stopped, if you had not cared enough to talk to a strange woman sitting on some steps, none of this would exist." Wyatt came to stand behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "But I did stop, and you did choose to come with me, and here we are." "Here we are," Emma echoed, reaching up to take his hand. They had a few more good years, watching their family continue to grow and thrive. Wyatt taught his grandsons to ride and rope, passing on skills he had learned over a lifetime. Emma taught her granddaughters to cook and sew, but also to read and think for themselves, to be strong women who knew their own minds. They took long walks around the property, showing the children the creek where Wyatt had proposed, the spot where they had first pitched their tent while building the house, the big oak tree where they had carved their initials all those years ago. In the spring of 1905, Wyatt fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, then developed into something more serious. The doctor came from town and shook his head gravely. "Pneumonia," he said, and at Wyatt's age it was serious. Emma refused to leave his side, sitting by his bed day and night, reading to him, holding his hand, remembering their life together out loud. Samuel and Grace and Thomas came with their families, filling the house with the people Wyatt and Emma loved most. On a quiet morning in April, with Emma holding his hand and his children gathered around, Wyatt looked at his wife one last time. "I told you once that you gave me a reason to live," he whispered, his voice weak but clear. "And you did. Every single day with you was a gift. Thank you for choosing life. Thank you for choosing me." "I would choose you 1,000 times over," Emma said through her tears. "In every life, in every world, I would always choose you." Wyatt smiled, that same gentle smile that had first made Emma believe life was worth living, and then he closed his eyes and slipped away peacefully, surrounded by the family they had created together. Emma grieved deeply for her husband, but she did not break. She had learned long ago that grief was the price of love, and the love she had shared with Wyatt was worth any price. She continued to live on the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, telling stories about Wyatt and keeping his memory alive. She lived for another 7 years, vital and engaged until nearly the end. She saw the ranch continue to prosper under Samuel's management. She saw Grace's children graduate from school. She saw Thomas win awards for his horses. She saw the automobile replace the horse in many places, electricity come to rural areas, the world change in ways she and Wyatt could never have imagined. But through it all, she remembered that day in August 1877 when a cowboy had ridden into a dying town and found her waiting to die. She remembered how he had given her a reason to keep living, and how that single act of compassion had blossomed into a love that lasted a lifetime and created a legacy that would endure for generations. Emma passed away peacefully in her sleep in the fall of 1912, in the bed she had shared with Wyatt for so many years. Her children buried her next to him on a small hill overlooking the creek, under the shade of those oak trees they both loved. The headstones were simple but elegant, bearing their names and the dates of their lives, with a single line added at Emma's request. He gave her a reason to live. She gave him a reason to love. The Bradford Ranch continued to thrive, passing down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story. But it all began with two broken people who found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, who chose hope over despair, who built something beautiful from the ruins of their past. Their love story became legend in the family, told and retold to children and grandchildren, a reminder that it is never too late to start over, that love can heal the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of something even more wonderful. The empty town of Johnson City, Texas, eventually came back to life as new settlers moved in, but none of them knew about the woman who had sat on those steps waiting to die, or the cowboy who had given her a reason to keep living. That story belonged to the Bradfords, passed down like a precious heirloom, growing richer with each telling. And on summer evenings, when the family gathered on that porch Wyatt had built so long ago, watching the sun set over the land he and Emma had loved, they could almost feel the presence of their ancestors, still together, still in love, their story woven into the very fabric of the place they had called home. It was a story of second chances and stubborn hope, of finding light in the darkest places, of two souls who recognized each other across the distance of their pain and chose to walk forward together into an unknown future. It was a story that reminded everyone who heard it that life, no matter how difficult, no matter how painful, is always worth living when you have love to guide you home.